Hi, I'm H Black and today I'm going to talk about why humans live so long. We have really long lives compared to the other great apes like orangutans, gorillas or chimpanzees, but why is there such a difference between our lifespans? I mean, we are really similar genetically. Well, the wild humans who lived the hunter-gatherer lifestyle actually had a very similar average life expectancy to a wild chimpanzee. However, in captivity, chimps have a life expectancy of around 40 years, with the oldest captive chimp reaching the age of 79 years old, which is way lower than humans' life expectancy, with the oldest human recorded at 122 years old. So today, I'm going to go over all the theories I've found as to why our lifespan is so much longer than our great ape relatives. The first being the grandmother effect, which stated that we evolved to live longer lives because grandparents provided significant benefits to whichever group they were in, as they could support their grandkids through childhood, which meant that less kids died and they could pass their knowledge on to another generation of the tribe, which made the grandkids more capable of hunting, foraging, and thriving. There was a simulation of this concept which began with only 1% of women living to grandmother age. The researchers made the grandmother effect weak by assuming that women could only be a grandmother between the ages of 45 and 75. They then let the simulation run for 60,000 simulated years, and the results of the simulation were similar to those seen in actual hunter-gatherer populations, in that about 43% of adult women became capable of becoming grandmothers, showing that being of grandmothering age was a genetic advantage that humans would have naturally selected for. The simulation found that from adulthood, additional years of life almost doubled from 25 to 49 years, and showed that even a weak grandmother effect could make simulated creatures evolve from chimp-like longevity to human longevity. Grandmothering also made ancient humans more socially complex, as other great apes rely entirely on their mothers, whereas we humans have adapted to seek attention and help from anyone in childhood, leading us to be more social later in life. And interestingly, a 56-year-old chimp gave birth in captivity a few years ago, which means that chimps can give birth for their entire lives, which is probably why they never adopted grandmothering. The second theory states that the higher the number of neurons in the cerebral cortex, the longer a species' lifespan. In fact, the data predicted that around 75% of all the variation in longevity is based on the amount of cortical neurons that a species has. This data also suggested that the body size and metabolism, which are the usual standards of comparing animals, actually only predicts around 20 to 30% of an animal's lifespan. This kind of neuron is important because the cerebral cortex is the part of your brain which gives your body adaptability. It adjusts and learns how to predict and react to stresses, like making sure your heart rate, breathing, and metabolism are on track with what you're doing, how you feel, and what you expect to happen next. So when you lose these neurons, you just kind of stop functioning, and the data suggests that all warm-blooded species accumulate damage at roughly the same rate. So the more cortical neurons you have, the longer you can accumulate that damage, and hence the longer your potential lifespan. The third theory states that the increase in the length of life is rooted in humans' more carnivorous diet, which require brain development to become better at capturing or hunting animals, which are a higher energy food than most plants. Eating raw flesh, which was infected and diseased in the era before cooking, stimulated chronic inflammation and infections, and in response, humans evolved a unique variant of a cholesterol-transporting gene called apolipoprotein. The most common of these genes, ApoE3, emerged roughly 250,000 years ago. It lowers the risk of most aging diseases, specifically heart disease and Alzheimer's, and is linked with a pretty significant increase in lifespan. A more ancient variant of this gene, ApoE4, shortens lifespan by several years and accelerates degenerative changes in arteries in the brain, especially dementia. It's thought that ApoE4 may be the result of the antagonistic pleiotropy theory of aging, in which genes which help an animal succeed in their early life have adverse effects in later life. And although we don't know the mechanisms behind it, ApoE2 is said to have neuroprotective effects, as an 8-year study showed that people who had at least one of these genes had an improved memory in old age, and a significantly lower incidence rate of Alzheimer's. So to tie this all together, we developed genes from eating meat that allowed us to survive infection and inflammation in both childhood and old age. This meat allowed us to grow larger and more complex brains because of the huge amount of proteins and carbohydrates we got from digesting the meat. This increased our longevity and allowed older people to better nurture their children, which over generations made us naturally select the more intelligent, better nurtured children, increasing their lifespan, which eventually spread to the whole population. If you have any thoughts, then leave them in the comments.